welcome to episode 258 of the Daily Fantasy Edge. My name is Adam Levitan. I'm one of the analysts here at DraftKings. I'm the father of the most beautiful beast in the world, Jerry, of course, and today we begin our NFL draft series. This is a young man who has built his own model for evaluating prospects, a young man who has blasphemized the DFS industry's beloved SPARQ score, which we'll get into. A young man living my dream life in Southern California. A young man who worked for the San Diego/LA Chargers. It is, of course, Hayden Winks, formerly of those Chargers, currently of Roto World. Hayden, what's going on?
How's it going, man? Thanks for having me on. Really glad to be here. One thing before we get started, I got a quick confession for you. So every night when I go to bed, my girlfriend only wants one thing, and that is for you guys to be on the phone. They want the three donkeys. They want the fantasy edge. She's asking where the zombie killer is. How's the humble narrator? Where's CSU Ram 88? Any regular employee Jonathan Bales. That's all she wants.
Wow. This is the first female listener we've ever had. Yep. That's insane. I might need to speak with her. This is the first woman that's ever actually wanted me to speak to her before bed. That's amazing.
Yeah, this is it. Apparently, your voices make you fall asleep faster. So.
Oh, okay. All right. Why don't you tell the people first what you did for the Chargers, and then how you got involved with the Chargers, and then I'm also curious because I think you were in the marketing department of the Chargers, but I'm also curious if you tried to pitch them on your analytics theories about which we're going to get into with prospects.
Yeah, so joined the Chargers after graduating from USC. I was in the marketing department, corporate sponsorships, that type of deal, ticket sales, and then basically big game plans. This was in the first season when they were in LA, so it's a big transition. But yeah, I was trying to break in. I studied marketing and stuff, so that was cool if I got that way. But I mean, in real honesty, I was trying to get into the football side of things. So I did some things during the season, I met a scout that I know, just talked to him a little bit. Then I was charting plays, doing some advanced scouting type of things, and then just emailing it to the football side of things. So at the end, I got a little meeting, I'd say, with someone pretty high up on the football side over there. It was really, really cool to get some feedback and stuff. Nothing really happened, but we'll see. Maybe something else comes of it.
That's cool. I would think that, I guess my first reaction, if I was on the football side, I would be like, who is this dweeb from the marketing department trying to tell me who to draft or whatever, But it seems like they were more open to it than that.
Yeah. I think when you send so many emails and I'm interacting with these people, not on a regular basis, but you see them around, they would know who I am and stuff. So it was worth a shot.
I think one of the issues is the old school NFL, the cocoon, as our friend Evan Silva would call it, does not believe that we can scout for the NFL without actually watching the players. I was interested in talking to you because I believe you've developed a way, and I know a lot of people have tried this, and there's all kinds of models and all kinds of different stats, which we're going to get into. But I believe there's a way where you can scout and not be fooled by your eyes. And obviously people are going to say, well, of course, the best thing to do is use both, right? Use numbers and use your eyes. I'm just skeptical that a lot of people, or very many people, know what they're looking at with their eyes. So can we scout without watching, I guess, is the bottom line here, Hayden?
I would say you could do it pretty dang well. So what I've learned in this, there's a lot of production, athleticism that goes into this, but there's ways to take scouting data, put it into your model, and you don't even have to do that. Be watching the players. So draft capital, I use projected draft capital. So there's consensus big board data, consensus mock draft data. That's stuff that I'm using for my tools. That aspect is probably the most important variable across all the models. There's some biases there where, of course, if a team picks a player in the first round, they're going to give him every single chance he has. So it doesn't always necessarily mean they're the best player, but we're trying to predict success, whether that's fantasy football success, just overall success. it definitely matters. But I would say inputting scouting grades is important. You can get there solely using analytics and do basically just as well as the draft's doing. All of the models I use have outperformed just regular draft capital. And that's just using with some consensus big board data. So it's doable. Trying to influence somebody to go all in on that is a different story though.
Sure. Well, there's some chicken and egg there, right? Because if you tell someone that this guy's a good player or this guy's going to have early career success, which I guess is the point of the model, will he have early career success? A huge part of that is where he's drafted, because as you said, these teams feel like they have to give playing time. They have to give targets and carries to players who they take in the first, second, maybe sometimes even the third round. So there's a little bit of chicken and egg there, right? Like instead of telling teams who's going to be good, you tell them who's going to get opportunities is going to be good. And a lot of times I think that's true, but there has to be some level to parse through with some guys have to be better than others, right?
Yeah. So I've created for each position and then within each position different models. So I'll have one with draft capital in it and one without it. So the one without it is kind of like, all right, these are like the analytics players. So you'll see someone like Andy Isabella. He's a wide receiver, like just goes off the charts. He would be by far the number one player or receiver in the class. So that would be someone I would be like, hey, this is somebody we need to be more interested in, scout this person a little bit longer. And then there's on the flip side, hey, this person that's projected to go in the second round is terrible analytically. Like what's going on here? So there's a little combination, but I think that's pretty much needed, and I don't think every single team's doing this.
I think when you're doing any model, whether it's for sports betting or for DFS or projecting what players are going to be good, the whole key to it, I think maybe that people don't realize, is figuring out, before you start anything, figure out what stats are important, right? So like if you're trying to win at DFS, figure out what stats in football are important to DFS production, or for sports betting, what stats are important, and like last year, passing efficiency was obviously extremely important to team success. And obviously a lot of people, probably rightfully due to the rules, think that's the way it's going to continue to go. What are some of the stats that are important for college prospects, whether that be combine or whether that be college stats or whatever?
Yeah, so this really is dependent on the position you're looking at. And something I did was break down positions by weight or height. So one thing I always see is, like, for wide receivers, it's the same model across the board. But you have a player like Marquise Brown in the 168-pound range, and the same model as DK Metcalf at 6'3", 230 pounds, whatever he is. I think there's a major flaw in that. So what I did is I broke those down into groups, and you're going to see slight differences, whether it's like agility scores are different, how important the 40 is. There's minor differences across the board, but the main takeaway is you want to have early career production. So if you're only looking at what a player's doing at 18 years old, 19 years old, 20 years old, you're going to get there. You're going to get most of the way there. So the tough part is when you have a player that absolutely just craps the bed at the combine, that has a lot of production, or somebody that broke out late, but he has a lot of production as like a 21 or 22-year-old, and he does well at the combine. That's where you have to start making decisions. And there's a couple players in the draft that we have to do that this year.
Yeah, well, there could be issues with playing time, right? Like, for instance, a guy we're going to talk about, or we might talk about, Irv Smith, played behind, I believe, O.J. Howard for a while. Miles Sanders played behind Saquon Barkley. So you could say there's a reason that these guys didn't produce early in their career. I agree with you, though. When guys are 18 and 19, I mean, all the data shows that if you have big success at the college level at age 18 and 19, I mean, it is a huge, huge edge. What about things from the combine? Let's just talk specifically about running backs. What do you think are the important stats for running backs, college and combine?
So for running backs, the 40-yard dash does matter. I wouldn't say running a 4.35 or something makes you an incredible prospect, but getting into that range above the 4.62, 4.63 area kind of depends what minimum threshold you're hitting. but in that range, that's where you got to start pumping the brakes on some of these prospects. And it's all dependent on their weight as well. So Devin Singletary doing that is a huge no-no. When you get Montgomery or Josh Jacobs doing it, it's a little scary, but it's not as scary as somebody that's 5'8" doing that. So speed definitely matters. Kind of to my surprise, the vertical jump and the broad jump weren't as predictive as I thought they were going to be. I always have seen that. People really love to mention that stuff. And then agility times matter a little bit, not too much. But I mean, in general, the combine matters a little bit, but it's the production. A general range, the R squareds of the college production are around 0.20, and the combine ones are about 0.02-ish. So there's a pretty big difference there.
Okay, speaking of the combine, the DFS community is enthralled with SPARQ scores. And for those guys that don't know, you can go to 3 Sigma Athlete. I believe it's Zach Whitman's site. I've talked about it on here before. To me, it's just a quick way to see how athletic a guy is. It's been reverse engineered by Zach to figure it out. There are problems with it, and I can see where you're going, and I know the issues that are with it. Not position specific, I think, is the biggest one, right? Explain your problems with the beloved SPARQ score.
So the SPARQ score kind of depends on what position you're looking at. Some positions you'll get a higher R squared. Some positions it like straight up does not matter. And I think the major problem is the formula doesn't change from position. So how many bench presses you hit, that's the same for a running back and for an offensive lineman for the formula. So obviously, we all know that a corner doesn't need to hit the bench that much, but it'd be really important for him to run fast. So what I'm going to be doing, and it should be coming out within a couple of weeks, is position adjusted SPARQ scores. Basically, what I'm trying to do is find out what actually matters for the position and then build a formula instead of having a formula already written out.
Yeah, what I find interesting about SPARQ is it's not necessarily about football, right? It's just who's the best athlete, period. So I get that you don't need to bench that well to be a corner or whatever. I'm still interested in who are the best athletes, pure athletes on the field. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, there's definitely weight. I think there could be some problems like for this year, there's a player came from Kansas State, the running back, Alex Barnes. He was a 99th percentile SPARQ athlete. So everyone, I'm sure if I looked at ADP, his ADP probably went up a little bit. But if you look at what he was good at the combine, it was the bench press, it was the vertical jump, it was the short shuttle. And those just haven't been super predictive for running back success. And the stuff that has like speed score and the 40-yard dash, he was just average at those. So a formula that I would be using would not put him anywhere near the 99th percentile. So it could be tricky at times. Overall, it's still good. There's just small improvements that I think we need to be making.
All right, let's get to some of these prospects because I find this running back class to be mostly yawn worthy. And I feel like some of the guys are getting propped up because the class isn't that great. By the way, we're going to hit running backs and tight ends this week. Next week, we'll be back with quarterbacks and wide receivers right before the draft starts. And then after the draft is over, we will have some people on to talk about landing spots, which obviously for fantasy purposes is going to be the most important. As Hayden mentioned, draft capital plus landing spot is going to be almost more important, I would say, than how good a player is. Would you agree with that, Hayden?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's the same thing as you do with DFS. All these knuckleheads are trying to figure out how good a player is. They're just figuring out how much opportunity he has. And then, it's basically the same thing. Okay.
Let's start with Josh Jacobs because this one, I don't want to say it confuses me, but man, I mean, first round pick on a running back on a guy who ran a 4.60, who performed really poorly at a pro day, I thought, where you would expect the numbers to be significantly better than they are at a combine. You would think that a running back to go in the first round would have to be truly jumping off the page elite. I am no tape watcher. I know you're not either, but do you see Josh Jacobs as worthy of being a first round pick in next week's draft?
No, I wouldn't. It would be pretty rare for me to say that regardless, but I wouldn't say it. He just doesn't have the athleticism that you would like to see. At least the athleticism that we can measure. I would say he probably has pretty high contact balance, all that type of stuff. You'll hear this scouting analysts talk about all that stuff. But it's the athleticism and it's kind of the production. He was kind of stuck behind Damian Harris and others at Alabama. But the advanced metrics, so I'm talking broken tackle percentage, 20-plus yard run percentage, and one that I really like is your yards per carry and your touchdown rate versus your teammates. And Josh Jacobs had the highest touchdown rate versus his teammates in the draft class. He had, 4.3 percentage points higher than other running backs, and that's Damian Harris, who I would say is the second best running back in the class. So, yeah, you kind of have to peel back the curtains. He can catch a little bit. So I would say he's the best running back in the class. But I wouldn't take him with the top 32 pick if I was an NFL team.
Yeah. And I wrote an article on DK Playbook about minimum thresholds for elite fantasy production. And obviously a lot of this is going to come down to landing spot. If Josh Jacobs becomes a 3-down plus goal line back for the Saints or whatever, which obviously is going to happen. But if that happened, of course, he would be an elite fantasy player. He just doesn't have the makeup of one that typically is, but we'll see. Team Watch the Games likes Josh Jacobs a heck of a lot. You mentioned Damian Harris, tested far better athletically than Josh Jacobs. Actually, I believe played ahead. I mean, at worst was 1A versus 1B to Josh Jacobs at Alabama. I've heard people describe Damian Harris as like a very poor man's Ezekiel Elliott, maybe not as much burst at the line as Jacobs or Zeke or something like that. But yeah, from just an athletic perspective and from a playing time perspective, why is it not closer between Damian Harris and Josh Jacobs?
Yeah, so for me it is, and you're right. Damian Harris had a couple more carries, was used pretty much the same as Jacobs was in the receiving game. So Damian Harris is a far safer prospect. He is just the guy that's going to pick up yardage. He was first in negative rushing yards, or the fewest. He has some big play potential. You don't have to worry about athleticism with him. He was a leader on the team. So yeah, I think he's the safer player. I'm not sure if you're going to get that upside. He's clearly not in the Ezekiel Elliott range, but I see a 2-down, 3-down potential player in the NFL. He's not going to be the sexy prospect, but I think he's going to get opportunity early.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I want to move on to, and maybe I'm biased. Everybody knows went to Penn State, class of 2004. Obviously, Penn State is having a major renaissance in terms of fantasy performers. Chris Godwin, Saquon Barkley. I think Mike Gesicki has a chance to step forward. Allen Robinson. There's just continue to churn out skill players from Penn State. And I feel like Miles Sanders is someone who was stuck in the shadow of Saquon Barkley. And people are like, well, he's not as good as Saquon, so they just brush him off. Meanwhile, I thought Miles Sanders was heck of a player, really good combine. He met all the minimum thresholds of an elite fantasy running back. Give me your thoughts on Miles Sanders.
Yeah, so he was a 61st percentile running back in my model, and I would say that's a huge win for him considering he didn't have any of that early age production, and that there's like a reason for that. So I'm not even worried about that. He would be potentially my RB1. He's definitely top 3. He's the guy's going to pick up yardage. He's been used in the passing game. He's athletic. So I don't really see any reason to not be a little bit bullish on Sanders. I'm not sure if he's going to be crazy elite. That's kind of dependent on landing spot. But, I mean, I think you're getting a good running back, just bottom line.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't fathom Josh Jacobs in the first round or Miles Sanders in the third round. You know what I mean? Like, it seems like just a no-brainer to wait on that, but I don't think NFL teams are going to see it that way. We'll talk about that in a second, though, when we talk about these draft special bets. All right, a couple more running backs I want to get your take on. Justice Hill, only 198 pounds, which is scary for a running back, was very strong, 21 reps on the bench, which is good, really tested well in the vertical and the broad. Also, if you talk about early age production, I believe Justice Hill just went absolutely ham as like a true freshman, over 1,000 yards as a true freshman, 200 carries. I presume that would make him rate pretty well in your model, no?
Yeah, he would. The problem I have with him is projected draft capital.
Hmm.
I currently have him projected as the 126 overall pick. He could go up a little bit higher than that, but there's a huge hurdle to make there. But as a player and as an athlete, I think he deserves to go a little higher than that. So he started over Chris Carson that 18-year-old season, and we all pretty much like Chris Carson. He has a 31 reception season under his belt. He was really a big play specialist. So he was second in non-red zone touchdown percentage. So that's 20 plus yard touchdowns. His touchdown rate was 7.1%. So you're getting somebody that has some big play potential. He is a little bit small, but you're getting at least an athlete and somebody that has done it before. So
How are you projecting draft positions? Is it just aggregate of big boards?
yeah, so Dane Brugler, he has a 7-round mock draft, so that is a big component of it. And there's some other composite things. This was like not me like going too crazy into it. This is more just like, all right, here's putting weights on Brugler's mock draft and some other things. So
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, last running back I want to get your take on is a guy who seemed like everybody was really high on during the season and then just flopped at the combine. That's David Montgomery. I mean, 4'6", 340, 28-inch vertical, really, really poor. Also, only 15 reps on the bench, was really, really poor. I think from a full PPR perspective, which we're always intrigued by, he did catch 58 balls in his last 25 games at Iowa State, which I think is important. I would love to know, and maybe I should do this, how much receptions in college correlate with NFL receiving success. But anyways, David Montgomery, clearly not the athlete that we thought he was. Where does that make him fit for you?
Yeah, so this was kind of predictable from the athleticism standpoint. He was the only running back that went to the combine that did not have a 20-yard touchdown this last year. There are issues with burst. There's issues with his long speed. Of course, that's a huge aspect of this. But he does have all that production, so I'm not going to be too low on him. The receiving stuff, it does correlate. It's not like too crazy, but if you catch passes as a college player, you're going to get catch passes in the NFL. So I see it's kind of dependent on his landing spot. I think I've been projected as the 82nd pick. So he's in range of getting opportunity as a rookie. So yeah.
Miles Sanders or David Montgomery?
Miles Sanders, for sure.
Yes.
For sure.
Go State. Go State.
That's right.
Okay. Let's move to a few tight ends here. TJ Hawkinson is in basically everybody's like top 10 or top 5 of their big board, like the actual best players in the draft, not best skill players, not best tight ends, actual best players in the draft. I mean, people are in love with TJ Hawkinson. 49 catches at Iowa for 760 yards last year. I'm curious, A, what you think of him, and B, from a fantasy perspective, is he rated that highly because he's good at blocking, which isn't always a good thing for fantasy production, or is it because of his pass catching ability?
Yeah, so I've been hearing some Gronk comparisons. That's the type of prospect we're dealing with here. A lot of that is with the blocking ability. So that, like, I would be shocked if he wasn't on the field as a rookie, even as a tight ends that usually break out later. I'd be really surprised. He's going to enter the league as one of the best blockers. And he is a good athlete. He's not at the Noah Fant level, but he also has a lot of production. So, I think we should be rightfully bullish on him. He's going to be a fantasy tight end eventually. Hopefully he goes to the right team. But, I mean, he's considered by some as the safest prospect in the draft, period. And that's really saying something as a tight end.
Yeah. Do you think that he would be asked to be a pass catcher early in his career, or they're going to say, hey, we have this great blocker and yeah, he'll catch some passes, but really want him to focus on blocking early in his career? Is that possible? That scares me when people are like, oh, we're going to take this guy. He's such a great blocker. It scares me for fantasy.
Yeah, it does. And in my models, Noah Fant came out ahead of him. And I think there's just early age production that goes into that. Hawkinson he's not an older prospect, but Fant was doing this as an 18-year-old. Hawkinson was doing this as, I believe, a 20-year-old. But yeah, I mean, there's some probability that happens. I'm not going to be bearish on him, though. He's really, really good.
Okay, let's move to Noah Fant, who you mentioned. By the way, I don't know what's going on with Iowa tight ends, but if I'm not mistaken, Hawkinson, Fant, obviously this year, George Kittle,
Yep.
CJ Fedorowicz, Dallas Clark, all went to Iowa. I mean, what is going on there? It's crazy. Anyways, Noah Fant, 6'4", 249, 4.50 speed, certainly looks like the kind of player that we want in fantasy for tight end, not the kind of guy that's going to play in line. I want my tight ends to like play that joker position. I am I don't want to say more excited about Noah Fant than TJ Hawkinson, but it seems close, at least for fantasy.
I mean, I'll say I think Fant's going to be the better fantasy tight end than Hawkinson. I'm sure that's a somewhat of a hot take, but he was straight up the best tight end in my model's history. So you're talking like crazy athleticism, burst, agility, and speed. And he has a ton of production early on. I think he had 11 touchdowns as a 19-year-old. He was really good in the red zone this year. He had 5 touchdowns on his 9 targets. That was first in the class. And yeah, he's just an explosive athlete that you don't really see this type of athleticism very often from tight ends. And a lot of the times those tight ends kind of go overlooked and they're getting drafted in like the 3rd, 4th, 5th round. With Fant, you're going to get a first-round pick on top of the athleticism, on top of the production. I don't really see too many ways this can go sideways unless he's dropping passes, which has been somewhat of an issue, but I think that's a little overanalyzed.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think, yeah. I mean, I haven't watched Noah Fant play a lot, but his measurables seem to line up with Evan Ingram some. Did you notice that at all?
Yeah, definitely. That would be a good comparison. They'll probably get drafted in the same range. Yeah, I would say pretty similar. Just hope the landing spot is just as good, or if not a little bit better. So,
well, after Hawkinson and Fant in this draft will likely be Irv Smith as the 3rd tight end off the board. Didn't have a lot of playing time, I believe, early in his career, but got loose last season. 44 catches, 710 yards, 7 touchdowns for Alabama. Did play inline slot, backfield some. Is it possible? You know, we're never going to be excited about like 3rd or 4th round tight ends. I don't know where Irv Smith is going to go. What do you think about him?
Yeah, so I think I have him projected as the 53rd overall pick.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, I think some people have that probably too low. Like some people are projecting him to go 32nd overall to Patriots. So, I mean, that would be a huge landing spot. Irv Smith's another player that would SPARQ would miss. His broad jump, short shuttle, agility scores aren't that great, but he was 43rd percentile on the 40-yard dash, and that is the number 1 predictor for athleticism for tight ends. So I'm going to be more bullish on Irv Smith and others. First in marginal explosion last year, 2nd in touchdown rate, 3rd in yards per target at 11.5. Was good in the red zone, caught 38% of his red zone targets went for touchdowns. So, yeah, I mean, I think you're getting a good player. He's going to have decent draft capital. So he's in a tier below Hawkinson and Fant. But I think he's clearly your tight end 3 this year. And I think there's a path where he can be a fantasy player maybe year 2.
Okay, that's interesting. All right, I want to move quickly to some of these bets you can make on DraftKings because I actually think there's probably a pretty big edge here if you're following news really closely. I know you're following these bets, and what I mean by these bets are basically where will guys go, how many of X position will be drafted in the first round, you know, how many X from what college will be drafted in the first 3 rounds. There's just a zillion bets you can make. I just picked out 3 here that I thought were interesting. First running back drafted, Josh Jacobs is minus 500, meaning you have to lay 500 to win 100. It seems like almost a lock, minus 500. I hate to lay that much, but has anybody thought that anybody but Josh Jacobs would be the first running back drafted? If not, you can get plus 700 on Miles Sanders, plus 500 on David Montgomery.
Yeah, so nothing's an actual lock, but this is pretty dang close. So I have Jacobs being selected with the 30th overall pick, Sanders 77th, Montgomery 82nd. I haven't seen a mock draft where Jacobs isn't ranked higher. We have a lot of these big time media scouts that have Jacobs as like a top 10, top 15 player. Dane Brugler put out his 7-round mock draft, and it was not even close. It was Jacobs was the 39th pick, and I think that's potentially even a little bit low. And there's still a huge gap. So, I mean, laying minus 500 is never fun, but I think it's the plus EV move.
Okay, first wide receiver drafted, and we didn't talk about wide receivers, but obviously DK Metcalf had some issues at the combine with his agility, didn't play all over the field, didn't show slot ability, didn't run a wide route or route tree in college, but he's minus 200 to be the first wide receiver drafted. Seemed like a lot to me considering how many amazing athletes are in this wide receiver class. Marquise Brown plus 450, AJ Brown plus 600, Hakeem Butler plus 700, N'Keal Harry plus 900. Are we minus 200 certain that DK Metcalf is going to be the first wide receiver drafted?
We are not. So I think Marquise Brown plus 450 and AJ Brown plus 600. I'll pick one of those two. Those players I think are both going to be sliding into the first round. Maybe not AJ Brown, but I think Marquise Brown will. Daniel Jeremiah has tweeted out a bunch of times that he's very confident in Marquise Brown going first round. That's where he was projected to go before we learned of his foot injury, but all signs are that that's positive. So I would say Metcalf is the favorite to go first. I would not lay minus 200. And I think Brown at plus 450 is probably your best bet. And if you want to chase a little higher payday, go AJ Brown plus 600.
Yeah. DK Metcalf's very interesting. Dude is so jacked up. I don't know. We'll see. Okay. Last prop, total running backs drafted in the first round. Line is a half. So it's just, will there be a running back drafted in the first round or not? Over is minus 230. In other words, people are expecting Josh Jacobs, or the book is expecting Josh Jacobs to go in the first round at minus 230. Under a half is plus 165. I guess the question is simple. Do we think Josh Jacobs goes in the first round or not?
I would say this line's pretty sharp. So if I was going to do one or the other, I would definitely take the under. So that's Jacobs falling out in the first round at plus 165. Just the athleticism. If you were looking at consensus big board data, Jacobs would not be anywhere near this. So maybe teams get smarter and he slips. But yeah, this is a pretty tough line, but I guess chase it at plus 165.
Yeah, I think under. And like last year, one bet that I made was DJ Moore to be the first wide receiver taken, which ended up hitting. And Calvin Ridley was the pretty big favorite. But I think teams are maybe sharper than we give them credit for with some of this athleticism stuff. And Calvin Ridley probably slipped in part due to that. And maybe Josh Jacobs will slip in part due to that as well. So, I think teams feel the backlash when they take a running back in the first round from the community. Maybe they don't. Maybe I'm in this bubble where we're the only ones that think that, but I don't know.
One quick thing on that. These players like Metcalf and Jacobs, they're projected to go like in the second half of the first round. Of course, that's where all the best teams are. Some of your smarter teams are in that range. So I think if they were projected to go in like that 8-9 range, then you're going to get some teams take a bite. But I think the further you get down there, then you're dealing with some other teams that might have more analytics invested. So we'll see.
Yep, exactly. That's a good point. All right, let's get to the listener questions. Got a few good ones here. First one comes from Anthony Amico. He says, have you integrated any film grades into your models? And he also asks, when database scouting, are you looking more at composite score or the individual components / thresholds?
Yeah, so the draft capital or some kind of scouting data is like crucial. Like that's like the first step. If you want to really, like if you're doing dynasty drafts early and stuff, like just focus on where they're going to get drafted. And then the second part, building the models, I'm going to look at it basically piece by piece, but there are thresholds that I have weight thresholds. I have whether or not you had X amount of production at a certain age, athleticism. So yeah, I mean, all that stuff you have to have in here if you're going to take it seriously.
Question 2 comes from Aiden Queskin. He says, what generational talent is coming out of this draft? I believe that's a tongue-in-cheek question because the term generational talent gets thrown around so much, but it seems to me that everybody seems to think that Nick Bosa, the edge rusher out of Ohio State, is the consensus best player in the draft. Is he a generational talent? Is he your number one player in this draft?
No, he was, I think, like the 10th-ish player on my analytics big board. He does not have a lot of speed like some of the other guys. He's also been injured. He doesn't have that much production. I think he would have got there if he wasn't injured, but I don't see a generational talent. I'm not going to say he's a bad player. He's still a really good prospect. I think if you're looking at like Ed Oliver, potentially has that athleticism. Montez Sweat also defensively. And then, I mean, if you want to get really bold, you can go with Kyler Murray. He was the top quarterback prospect. I don't think he's in my models. I don't think he's actually that high of a prospect. And then I guess Hawkinson, but I don't really see a generational talent. But Aiden, I know you're joking around.
Who's the number one player on the analytics big board?
It's Kyler Murray, and it's not even close. So one thing I do is definitely adjust for positional value with quarterbacks. Obviously, that they're going to get a bump, but even without it, he was the guy. I mean, his stats are incredible. I don't even need to elaborate further.
Okay. Next question is from Jai843811. If getting a running back is considered a need for your team, but because running backs don't matter as much as other positions, when would you generally target a running back? When would you target a running back in this particular draft? Is the second part of his question.
Yeah. So, I mean, it kind of depends, but it would be like outside the top 100 for sure. Like the fourth round, somewhere in there. I would take flyers on like injured players. Someone like Bryce Love. I mean, I don't have their medical info in front of us, but someone just with upside. Like these players are going to bust anyways. Might as well just swing for the fences late. And I don't want to be spending actual draft capital on a position that's largely replaceable. Of course, there's going to be exceptions. Like I don't think Saquon Barkley's anywhere near replaceable, but yeah, I mean, give me the edge rushers and tackles and quarterbacks.
Yeah, I think that you can prioritize running backs. You know, it's gone like way overboard. I would never take him at second overall, but like, you know, spending a second or third round pick on a running back is not terrible if he's legit good. I think the problem with this class and some of the classes we've seen lately, obviously not last year, but some of the classes we've seen lately, is that there just weren't enough good running backs. And I feel like this year teams are going to overspend the position when it's just not there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. Last question we're going to do. People are looking for sleepers, of course. We're getting closer to the season. Everyone wants their sleepers. Mark Mathick wants to know, what is Hayden's late round tight end and running back picks in rookie drafts? They want the sleepers, guys, we didn't talk about.
Okay, well, Darrell Henderson, we didn't talk about. He's going to be a day two player. It's crazy production, a good enough athlete by like easily. He's been compared to James White by Greg Cosell, who that's a draft opinion I actually trust. I'm going to go with another name, James Williams out of Washington State. He's caught 48 passes, 71 passes, 83 passes in the last 3 years. He's not a great athlete. That is worrisome. He's going to be drafted late. That's another red flag. But I mean, if we're talking fantasy production, there's a chance that he actually gets utilized in a third down role. So this could be like a Nyheim Hines type situation where we don't actually get to see it. But I mean, late round players. For tight ends, Jace Sternberger, he's going to be a day two prospect. He's not the greatest athlete. He's not a terrible athlete, but he was super productive. He was a JUCO transfer. He scored 10 touchdowns last year. First in touchdown percentage versus his teammates, second in yards per target versus his teammates, first in just touchdown percentage in general, third in marginal explosion. You're getting a really productive player. You're going to get the draft capital that puts him in range. Yeah, maybe it'll take a little bit longer because he is somewhat raw coming from Kansas to junior college and then to Texas A&M. So yeah, those are going to be my two guys.
All right. I will have a rookie draft coming up, but we don't do it until after the draft. So I'll have a lot more information at my disposal, but I'll keep those guys in mind. All right. Hayden, tell the people where they can find you, Twitter, wherever, RotoWorld, where can they find you?
Yeah, so Twitter at Hayden Winks, and then all my stuff's going to be at rotoworld.com. Yeah, those are the two spots. Check in with I have a draft prop bets column coming up. So that'll be pretty interesting. And then I just came out with the analytics top 300 big board and some positional rankings. So check those things out.
What's the goal here, Hayden? Are you going to apply for these analytics jobs that are coming in the NFL? I saw the Panthers posted one. What is going on here?
We'll see. I like Roto-Roll a lot, so I'm not going to be trying to get out of my position. Shout out Roto-Roll, but I mean, we'll see. If the Chargers want some consulting, I'm open to it.
It seems like teams are gradually getting more and more open to having a bigger and stronger analytics department. It seems like it, and most of them at least.
Yeah, the Chargers, I believe, are the only team without a single person doing analytics at all. Maybe the general manager and stuff is doing that, but they do not have somebody solely doing analytics. So, Tom Telesco, if you're out here, I'm your man.
I'm sure Tom Telesco is listening intently all the way through to the 42-minute mark of this podcast. All right.
Well, real quick, I will say, when I mentioned that I worked for Roto-World, their ears perked up. So people are out there on the NFL side reading Roto-World. So
there you go.
Yeah,
it's great to hear. All right. For Jerry, for producer Luke, for Hayden, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody. We are promoters at DraftKings and also avid fans. Our usernames are Adam Levitan, Al Smizzle, and CSU Ram 88. We may sometimes play on our personal accounts in the games that we offer advice on. Although we have expressed our personal view on the games and strategies in this podcast, they do not necessarily reflect the views of DraftKings, and we also may deploy different players and strategies than what we recommended in this podcast.